A growing scandal involving Prince Harry and his last remaining genuine charity project, the Invictus Games. But is it really a charity project at all?
Boeing has officially pulled out of its sponsorship deal with the Invictus Games, and this story is set to break later today through Paula Froelich on News Nation. Boeing was the biggest single corporate sponsor of the 2025 Vancouver Whistler Games, and also co-presented the event alongside ATCO. Now the contract has expired, and Boeing has made the decision not to renew it.
This is the very reason why everyone who originally worked on and set up Invictus no longer works there. It's looking more and more like a scandal hiding in plain sight that the mainstream media don't want to go near.
This move carries major structural weight because it removes the key commercial backbone from the Invictus financial setup right as the next edition of the Games is getting ready for launch in Birmingham in 2027. Birmingham has already secured 11 anonymous sponsors, bringing in an estimated £4 million combined support. In Vancouver, Boeing held the headline sponsor position, while 44 corporate partners supported the event overall.
His past notes to a Daily Mail reporter were made public, and he was mocking and saying how much he hated going out and pressing the flesh. They were not invited, and Meghan was upset because while she's never been invited and her people kept saying she doesn't go, that's not her thing, and I'm like, that's a load of horse twaddle, because she is always said she wants to be in fashion and that fashion is her jam.
The shift happening here is not gradual or soft. It's a sharp step change, and that step clearly goes downward. This is the central headline being discussed in the Outspoken broadcast hosted by Dan Wooten with Paula Froelich this week, alongside Froelich's deeper investigative reporting now published through her Substack and News Nation coverage. Froelich is a former New York Post columnist with over 3 decades of investigative journalism experience. She has been reviewing Invictus Games Foundation UK Charity Commission filings, Vancouver Whistler Games corporate tax records, and the licensing structure connecting the organizations. The financial breakdown she has put together is now in the public domain, and the overall structure is being described as highly concerning. Independent commentary circles are now drawing similar conclusions and pushing for stronger public and corporate response.
This is the very reason why everyone who originally worked on and set up Invictus no longer works there. Since leaving the royal fold, the foundation has become a cash cow for Harry and Meghan, and no doubt some others who are involved. It's all bubbling to the surface.
The royal commentary channel known as Megs has even called for a boycott of remaining Invictus sponsors, including Boeing from its earlier involvement in American Airlines, claiming the games function as a setup where veterans are used for PR optics, funded trips, luxury Sussex stays, and a surrounding Meghan Markle merchandising layer, rather than being centered on veterans themselves. Another commentary voice, Tash, has added that everyone who originally helped build and run Invictus has now left the organization. These exits are not being seen as random. Instead, they are being interpreted as a signal that the original operational team no longer recognizes the foundation under its current leadership as the same mission it was created for. Since Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the foundation is described in this framing as becoming a financial engine for them and a small circle around them.
I think it's people get freaked out by tax returns. And I also think sometimes people are a little bit lazy. They hear things, they say, oh, Invictus Games, 4 Wounded Warriors, which sounds like the Wounded Warrior Games. And people think, oh, this must be great. And a lot of people are unclear how to read a tax return or to check stats. And so I think it was just very easy to say, oh, the Invictus Games, it's great. It does all this.
Froelich's published analysis now puts numbers behind concerns that some commentary channels had already been raising through observation. The 2025 Vancouver Whistler Games brought together 543 wounded veterans from 23 countries. The total budget reached 63.2 million Canadian dollars, resulting in a cost per competitor of $118,352, a figure now heavily discussed in public debate. The United States Warrior Games, which is a similar competitive event for wounded American service members, runs on about $2 million per year. The German equivalent operates on roughly $200,000 and includes about half the number of participants. Compared to that, the Invictus Games runs at a massively higher cost level, far beyond what its closest counterparts spend, and the results are being questioned against that gap. Around 30 million Canadian dollars of public taxpayer money covered roughly half of the Vancouver Games.
Harry has to go to Birmingham this summer. He has to drum up some sort of business because at this point, A, it's just embarrassing. And B, yes, government funds are supposed to cover about half, but the other half are supposed to come from private companies and private individuals. And nobody's dropping a dime anymore because they are also saying, how come this costs so much money? And also, the other thing is you have to understand other people aren't showing up. The people are not coming to watch these games. They are volunteers who outnumber not only competitors, but everyone else by like 5 to 1.
Based on an alternative allocation breakdown produced by Rachel from the Curious Pilot channel, that same funding could have gone into thousands of prosthetic limbs, hundreds of exoskeleton units, tens of thousands of wheelchairs, accessible vehicle conversions, large-scale mental health therapy, physiotherapy programs, service animals, and home accessibility upgrades. The key mechanism here is the licensing fee structure, which acts as the channel where public money flows away from direct oversight. The Vancouver Whistler Games Corporation received both public funding and corporate sponsorships, then moved funds through the system. That corporation then paid a licensing fee to the Invictus Games Foundation, a UK-based charity that owns the brand. However, the exact amount of that licensing fee is redacted in public documents. There is no clear commercial reason, no privacy justification, and no security reason given for that redaction. It creates a gap in transparency that makes it impossible to track how much public funding is actually reaching veteran support versus internal costs.
I am not diminishing PTSD at all. But again, those funds could have really gone for PTSD help.
Yes.
They could have gone for a lot of other things.
Because PTSD doesn't impact how you physically compete. That is the critical difference here.
Right, exactly. And it's putting people on different scales, and also it's not supporting the Nigerian wounded. So it was really interesting, if you will. And by interesting, I mean gag-inducing.
Froelich has now also examined the 2024 Charity Commission filings for the foundation and placed them into public discussion. Those filings show direct grants to veteran organizations were cut by 63%, dropping from £534,000 to £200,000 in a single year. At the same time, foundation income increased by 41%, and a new six-figure executive position was introduced. Cash reserves rose to £2.3 million. The top-paid staff member earned between £120,000 and £130,000 per year, placing it at the higher end of UK charity pay scales. Legal expenses increased sharply from £45,000 to £155,000 without explanation. Deferred income also surged from £431,000 to £1.799 million, a 4-times jump. An American for-profit entity called Dunes LLC, with no clear purpose listed in the filings, received nearly £30,000 in 2023 and then nothing in 2024. The same document even shows 2 different company registration numbers, one on the cover page and another inside the financial statements, which is an irregularity that would normally raise serious accounting questions. The foundation's public claim is that 92% of spending goes to charitable activity.
Well, it's the Dr. Sophie Chandoka thing, isn't it? Which is that basically, if you admit the truth to Prince Harry, which is that you are now a hindrance to us raising funds, your connection actually makes it more difficult for us to go ahead and turn this into a success. All of a sudden, he explodes. And of course he explodes. But the problem is, Paula, he is going to cling onto this for dear life.
While this technically fits UK Charity Commission rules, the issue is how that category is defined. Charitable activity includes running the games themselves, not just direct veteran aid. That means hotel costs, transport, production, ceremonies, broadcast deals, and event operations are all counted inside the 92% figure. Direct grants to veterans, which actually dropped significantly, are included inside that larger operational pool. So while the number is technically correct, it gives a misleading picture of how much support is directly reaching veterans. The foundation is presenting its figures as if they can be compared directly to standard charity benchmarks for direct services. But the reality is that the core activity looks more like large-scale event production wrapped in charity branding. Tom Bauer's book Betrayal presents parallel findings from his own investigative reporting, claiming that Invictus-related funds have been used for private jets, five-star hotels, and transport arrangements linked personally to Harry and Meghan. The structural pattern Bauer highlights is the transformation of a charity structure into something that functions like a personal logistics system. The Wakeford analysis, which Wooten has also referenced separately, identified Invictus as the only remaining Sussex-linked charity operating at scale, and suggested Harry should concentrate his efforts there because other structures had effectively collapsed. Africa Parks is currently facing an active sexual assault investigation involving rangers in the Congo. Sentebale is tied up in a high court case involving Dr. Sophie Chandauka.
Well, you also know how he feels about it because during the court case with the Daily Mail, his past notes to a Daily Mail reporter were made public, and he was mocking and saying how much he hated going out and pressing the flesh, when frankly, buddy, that's what you're there for. He seems to think I'm doing the job I was born to do, but I don't know if he understands that job.
Archewell has been largely shut down. Invictus remains the final major vehicle. Froelic's ongoing reporting now suggests that Invictus is also showing financial and operational issues similar to the wider Sussex-linked charitable ecosystem. The wheelchair basketball example described in Betrayal highlights a strange operational moment inside the games. During a Vancouver match between the United States and Nigeria, the American team did not require wheelchairs at all. The Nigerian team did. After the match ended, the American players simply stood up and walked away. This raises a bigger structural question about what the games are actually meant to represent. Originally, Invictus was framed as a competition for wounded service members competing in adapted sports, but the presence of participants who do not require physical adaptations suggests the scope has expanded to include broader categories of injury, including psychological trauma like PTSD, which does not always involve physical disability. That expansion can be justified on its own terms, but it significantly changes what the games are operationally and publicly understood to be. By contrast, the Paralympics uses strict classification systems to ensure athletes compete against others with similar physical conditions. Invictus does not apply the same level of classification control, which leads to situations like the Vancouver basketball match, where the meaning of the wheelchair itself becomes unclear. Wooten's core criticism is direct. If the games now include participants with mental health injuries rather than only physical disabilities, then the public messaging should clearly reflect that shift. The term wounded service member carries a specific public meaning, and that meaning appears to be expanding without clear communication to match it.
Well, you also know how he feels about it because during the court case with the Daily Mail, his past notes to a Daily Mail reporter were made public, and he was mocking and saying how much he hated going out and pressing the flesh, when frankly, buddy, that's what you're there for. He seems to think I'm doing the job I was born to do, but I don't know if he understands that job.
A further question raised is why Harry himself, who has publicly spoken about his own mental health struggles, including PTSD symptoms, emotional breakdown accounts, and burnout experiences during past tours, does not apply the same competitive framing to himself within the game structure. The core argument being made is that mental scars don't affect physical performance in the same direct way as physical injuries do. The Paralympic system works because it is built around clear biological limitations and measurable physical conditions. Invictus, by blending categories more loosely, creates competitive setups that don't always match what audiences assume they are watching. Froelic's separate reporting also points to the atmosphere on the ground at the Vancouver Games. Attendance was extremely low. Volunteers reportedly outnumbered the competitors by about 5-1, and even the volunteers significantly outnumbered paying spectators. Crowds mainly appeared when Harry and Meghan entered specific venues for short appearances lasting around 10 minutes. Those moments created strong photo opportunities and the appearance of large public engagement. Outside of those staged or timed appearances, the actual audience presence was thin. This shifts the meaning of the event in a major way. It suggests the games may function more as a content production setup rather than a traditional sporting competition, with the competitions acting as the backdrop. In this framing, the real output becomes the images and media moments of Harry and Meghan at the event. The veterans, meanwhile, are positioned as part of the surrounding structure that supports that media visibility. This leads into a broader claim that the Invictus Games, in practical terms, operate like a large-scale public relations production linked to the Sussex brand and partially supported by taxpayer funding.
Well, you also know how he feels about it because during the court case with the Daily Mail, his past notes to a Daily Mail reporter were made public, and he was mocking and saying how much he hated going out and pressing the flesh, you know, when frankly, buddy, that's what you're there for. He seems to think I'm doing the job I was born to do, but I don't know if he understands that job.
Looking ahead, the financial picture for Birmingham 2027 reinforces this direction. The UK government has pledged up to £26 million in public funding, even though Birmingham entered bankruptcy in 2023 and only exited that status in February 2026. The city is still dealing with major structural issues in basic services, including unreliable waste collection. Against that backdrop, directing £26 million of taxpayer money to a global sporting event becomes a politically sensitive decision that will need ongoing justification. Originally, the funding model expected government support to cover about half of the game's budget, with the rest coming from corporate sponsors and private donations. However, Birmingham has only secured 11 sponsors so far, contributing around £4 million total. That leaves a significant funding gap still open. Boeing has already exited its sponsorship role. American Airlines, another major historical supporter, has also faced boycott pressure from independent commentary voices including Meg's and the Royal Grift. The sponsorship pipeline is clearly not meeting expectations. The staffing situation adds another layer of concern. Froelich has reported via News Nation that senior marketing candidates approached for leadership roles connected to Birmingham 2027, and the foundation have declined offers once they learned Harry is involved. At least one candidate reportedly said her professional reputation would be at risk, and she was not willing to attach it to the Sussex public profile. Since senior marketing leadership is directly responsible for securing sponsorships, these refusals signal a serious operational challenge 1 year out from the Games. Harry's own approach to the kind of fundraising work that real charity leadership requires has already been documented through the Daily Mail litigation. Notes he sent to a Daily Mail reporter, later revealed through the discovery process, included his own frustration with what he described as pressing the flesh, meaning the direct public engagement that fundraising depends on. The key structural issue here is that fundraising is not a side task in charity leadership. It is the main job. A figurehead role exists to attract attention and turn that attention into financial support for beneficiaries. Harry's documented dislike for this core responsibility creates a serious contradiction. If the central duty of the role is something he has openly expressed resistance toward, then it raises structural questions about fit for purpose. He has also publicly framed his work, including in his Kyiv Security Forum statement, as something he was born to do, while the actual operational fundraising side appears to be the part he has shown the least enthusiasm for. This contradiction between public messaging and documented private communication is now being highlighted by Froelich and other commentators as a central issue inside the Invictus structure.
They were not invited, and Meghan was upset because while she's never been invited, and her people kept saying, she doesn't go, that's not her thing. And I'm like, that's a load of horse twaddle, because she is always said she wants to be in fashion and that fashion is her jam, as opposed to the runny spread that is her jam. But she has always said this is her main thing. And to not be invited is a huge snub. And she thought that this year she could be, because Venus Williams was on the host board. She was hosting, as well as Beyonce.
Wooten's framing around the Birmingham funding gap also adds pressure to this picture. Harry has no other full-time operational employment. His previous roles have all contracted or ended. The BetterUp Chief Impact Officer position ended without replacement. The Spotify deal concluded after a single podcast series. The Netflix partnership has scaled down. Public speaking income, once projected at around $1 million per appearance, has reportedly fallen closer to $50,000. By any practical measure, Invictus is now his main full-time focus. Against that reality, the output comparison being drawn is stark. His full-time involvement in Invictus-related activity has produced roughly £4 million in corporate sponsorship over an extended period, against a UK taxpayer commitment of up to £26 million for the Birmingham Games. The imbalance is being described as structural rather than incidental. From this perspective, a philanthropist whose main work generates limited private sponsorship while relying heavily on large-scale public funding raises questions about value delivered relative to institutional support. Inside the organization itself, internal staffing dynamics add another layer of complexity. Reports suggest that 2 senior figures at Invictus Games Canada either left or were removed during preparations for Vancouver after disagreements with Harry on operational decisions. He then brought in supporters aligned with his approach to fill those positions. Commentators argue this reflects a broader pattern seen across Sussex-linked charitable structures, where internal disagreement leads to departures and alignment replaces challenge. The result, according to this framing, is operational instability that only becomes visible through financial filings and staffing changes over time. Froelic's reporting also notes that some insiders within the Invictus structure are now trying to keep operations stable until Birmingham is completed, after which they may feel more able to speak openly. At the same time, social dynamics around the Sussex Circle are also being highlighted. Froelic's earlier reporting around April first suggested Meghan had not been invited to the 2026 Met Gala, a detail later reflected in coverage from outlets like Town and Country and Harper's Bazaar. Those publications attempted to explain the absence through alternative social engagements, such as a Nobu lunch and a family first communion event, rather than addressing it directly as a non-invitation. The real operational reality, as Froelich has confirmed and Wooten has also backed through separate sourcing, is that Meghan and Harry were not invited at all. Meghan had reportedly expected an invitation this year because Venus Williams was on the host board alongside Beyoncé. But that connection didn't translate into an invite. Beyoncé is, in Froelic's framing, no longer aligned with the Sussex Circle. Venus Williams is described as having no personal support for Meghan. Serena Williams' past friendship with Meghan is also now said to be cooling off.
I love how they were like, oh, she never goes. Well, she's never gone because she's never been invited, first of all. Second of all, she really thought she was going to be this year. And of course, with her thing with one-off, shilling trauma closet, she would absolutely love to shill the Met Gala look, right? Met Gala look for less, Met Gala look in general, whatnot. But it wasn't going to happen.
Given Princess Diana went to the Met Gala.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
100%.
It's like that would very much have suited a narrative.
Yeah. We all know all Anna wants is Catherine.
A key moment being pointed to is Serena Williams being photographed in New York with Emma Thynne, the Marchioness of Bath and the first black woman to marry into a major British aristocratic family, alongside Edward Enninful. That image is being read as a clear sign of social realignment in elite circles. Anna Wintour, who holds the Dame Commander title and has close ties to King Charles and Queen Camilla, is also described as someone who would not host Meghan at any major event. At the same time, attention has shifted to Prince George's schooling decision. The Sun reported that William and Catherine visited Oundle School in Northamptonshire, a school not previously seen as a main expected option for George. Oundle costs around £59,000 per year and dates back to 1556. The school offers unique extracurriculars like a beekeeping club, jazz orchestra, and even a pipe band. Notable alumni include Iron Maiden singer Bruce Dickinson, who was reportedly expelled in the 1970s, England rugby players Ben and Tom Curry, scientist Richard Dawkins, and BBC correspondent Damien Grammaticus. The Good Schools Guide describes the campus as having elegant Jane Austen-style architecture without the floppy head entitlement tone sometimes associated with elite schooling. Prince George turns 13 this year and will finish at Lambrook School in Berkshire this summer. Earlier expectations suggested Eton as the natural path, given William attended there and it sits just a few miles from Windsor Castle. Marlborough College, Catherine's former school, has also been considered as a strong option. Oundle sits about 100 miles from the family home at Forest Lodge in Windsor, meaning it would make George a boarder. The interpretation offered by Wooten is that William and Catherine appear to be actively moving away from the automatic Eton route. Marlborough remains a strong possibility because it would continue Catherine's family tradition and keep all three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, on a more unified path. The Oundle visit shows they are seriously weighing multiple directions rather than defaulting to tradition. Froelic's interpretation is that Catherine's upbringing model, where the Middleton siblings stayed together at Marlborough and built strong bonds, is more stable than the royal generation model, where siblings were often separated by different schools and schedules. The comparison between Charles and his siblings and William and Harry is used to suggest that separation during schooling may weaken long-term family cohesion, while shared schooling strengthens it. Catherine is reportedly aiming for her little ones to develop the same kind of sibling unity the Middletons experienced. The broader conclusion being drawn is that these separate threads, the Boeing exit from Invictus, the wheelchair basketball controversy, financial irregularities, the Birmingham sponsorship gap, staffing refusals, the Met Gala absence, and even the Cambridge schooling decisions, are all part of one wider pattern. They are being framed as signs of a larger institutional sorting process taking place. In this view, Sussex-linked commercial and public projects are losing support from major institutional and corporate players needed to sustain them. Meanwhile, the Cambridge family is being positioned as increasingly stable and strategically aligned, making decisions that prioritize long-term family structure and institutional continuity. The two trajectories are being described as moving further apart. The Boeing withdrawal is highlighted as the strongest corporate signal so far, because Boeing is a company known for long-term, cautious decision-making and reputation management. From that perspective, its exit suggests the relationship was no longer seen as beneficial, and when a company of that scale makes that kind of call, it often influences broader corporate behavior. This puts the Birmingham 2027 sponsorship target under serious pressure. Without Boeing, closing the funding gap becomes far more difficult, if not structurally unrealistic. As a result, the £26 million UK taxpayer commitment is expected to carry more weight in the final funding picture, and the political consequences of that will likely define the next phase of the story.